everybody has to find their own truth and their own meaning, and nobody can find it for you. Like, we all have to find it for ourselves, and I truly believe that.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Food Matters podcast, your home for nutrition, health, and wellness education. My name is Laurentine. I am a filmmaker and a nutritionist and the founder of foodmatters.com, and I'm here to hold your hand on this journey to optimum health, transformation, and emotional healing. Hello, Food Matters community, family. How's everybody doing? Today, I have the pleasure to be joined with a good friend of mine, Marcus Gadd, who has just been touring. Hey, mate. He's just been touring Europe. He's just come back from his tour in Europe. He's a rising, I'll tell you a little bit about Marcus. So Marcus is a fast-rising reggae artist, and he comes from a beautiful island close to Vanuatu here called New Caledonia. It's a French island in the South Pacific. But he embodies spirituality and goodness and wholeness in his music. So he's like grassroots. He's performing on stage and bringing the message of Mother Earth to a lot of people. So what's so beautiful about Marcus is he brings his tribe with him. He brings his people with him when he travels. And he plays from the heart. You know, he's been playing alongside reggae artists like Sanskar, and Ostrada Reggae Fest in Shambhala, in Boomtown, and alongside Alberosi. Woo, that's so good. And Christopher Martin. And so he's here with us, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about how he got into this and what his message is to the world. So, Marcus.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. And
thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about how your journey started?
How the journey started? Well, actually, it started from a young kid, I'd say, like maybe way before music, because ever since I was a kid, I had these big questions in my mind that I needed to find answers to. And so I guess it started, with the spiritual side of things, because ever since I was a kid, I had this feeling there was something more to this existence than what I was actually being taught, what I was actually being told. And so coming to my teenage years, I guess music, and in particular reggae music, since it's a really spiritually oriented music, came with a lot of answers to the questions I was asking myself. And so I started, like, music was a really big call, I guess, when I was, I'd say, 14, 15. And ever since music came in my life, it never really got out of my life, and it took hold of everything. So I became a musician.
But tell us how you got to tour in Europe, because you started off at a beautiful island called New Caledonia, and now all of a sudden you're like hailing on the stages of Europe. Well, how did that happen?
It's a long story. I'd say, I started playing music in the street, actually. I went to France for the first time when I was 18 years old. And I was going there to pursue my studies, which is something a lot of New Caledonian kids do, since New Caledonia is a part of France. And so I went to France. And when I was in France, I saw that some people were singing in the street, to make a living, and which is something that people don't do in New Caledonia. And since I was a singer, I thought, like, I'll try and do that, because I was a student. I didn't have much money. So I started out like that. And playing in the street was really a mind opener for me, because I noticed that my voice would touch people, that my music had an impact on the people I met. And so playing in the street, I met a lot of people from the traveling world. And then I started traveling. I traveled a lot between my 18 and my, I'd say, like 24, 25. So I traveled for like 6-7 years. And when I was done with the travels, I went back home to New Caledonia, and this is when I started actually recording my music because I had been traveling for all these years, and like building up this message, having a lot of people tell me like, "Hey, you should actually do this." Like seriously, like you should be a singer,
Mm.
and so this is the way it started. And when I went back to New Caledonia from my travels, I started recording my songs with a really good childhood friend of mine, June. And we put the songs up on the internet. We didn't really know where to start because there's no music industry in New Caledonia. We didn't have any contacts whatsoever, so all we had was like the musical vibration and the will to get it out. So we put it on the internet, and I guess that's how it all started, because like people got to hear the music from the internet, and then we got a few contacts in Europe, and we kept on recording songs, and it went on and on until I got invited for my first tour in Europe.
It's amazing, amazing. Well done. And yes, here you are. And there's a new album coming out, and there's people lining up to get a hold of tickets. So well done. It's amazing. So can you tell us a little bit about we all come into jobs, and then somehow we actually have a spiritual message that we really want to convey. But sometimes it's not as
Mhm.
easy if you're working as an accountant or if you're working, as a cashier. But we all have a message. We all come to this world with a special, a dedicated message for the world. And I guess it's nice as a singer, you have the opportunity to literally touch with your vibrations so many people when you're singing on stage. So what would you say is your message that you would like to convey with your music and your work when you're on stage?
Well, I'd say, the message is very vast and broad, but if I had to sum it up in a few words, I'd say it's all about seeking truth, because that's the way I actually would say I view myself, is that I view myself as a truth seeker. And so a lot of my songs, there's like two main messages. The two main messages would be, first, like the earth. So I would say this is like the outward spirituality, which is like the world that surrounds us and that we are a part of, and how do we relate to this world, and how do we take care of it, how do we make it beautiful. And then the second part would be the inwards journey, like what is inside. So when I say a quest for truth, is who am I, what am I, where is my source, where do I come from, all these questions that were in my head, and going around in my head from a youth, is the questions I try to maybe not answer, but at least like find a pathway to find an answer through the song. So I would say these are the two main things, like the earth, biodiversity, everything that is outside of us, and the soul, the truth that is inside, like the inwards work. And I guess like all my work and everything I write revolves around these two notions.
Beautiful, beautiful. I guess we here at Food Matters have a similar mission, looking after the earth, looking at the purity of what we eat every day. It's like either junk food or it's the most healthiest, smoothie and fresh fruits and vegetables. And it's the same movement, it's like this or it's this.
Hmm.
And we all have a
Uh-huh.
choice. And we have a choice to look after ourselves, our temple, the planet, our greater community, or we can just self-destruct, so it's a beautiful message. And I feel like especially with what Food Matters is trying to do, is we're looking at how ways that we can actually as humans find truth in what's the healthiest foods to eat. Who's lying to us? Why do I pick up these lollies and it looks so yummy and it looks like the packaging, it should be, it's like it says it's a fruit sugar, but it's actually not, because so can we have these companies stop lying to us, right? So it's like, how can we get
Hmm.
deeper into the truth? And for me personally, I've lived here in the tropical South Pacific Islands, and I found that the people here, are living so close to earth in nature. They actually live with nature. They work with the land.
Hmm.
They grow their own food. They know how to plant. They know how to harvest. They know what season to harvest in. And I feel like us in the West, we've sort of lost connection with that type of, I guess it's a spiritual religion. We've lost touch with Mother Earth because we wouldn't even know how to plant. We wouldn't know how to harvest, what time of year, what to plant at what time.
Hmm.
So it's like, I feel like if you can maybe mention a little bit more about your upbringing in the Pacific, your upbringing with the natural
Hmm.
people, the tribal people, the indigenous, that has allowed you to be able to speak on this
Hmm.
topic so nicely.
Yeah, so like growing up in New Caledonia is a really privileged situation. I would say it's a really blessed situation because the South Pacific is, I believe, after having traveled a little, I believe it's the most preserved region on the planet. No, so as you were saying, people there, they still have a relationship with the land, and actually in Kanak culture, like they have this thing that they say is that it's not like people come out of the land, they belong to it, it's not the land that belongs to people. So in a sense, like when you come out of the land, you are the land, you are nature itself, you are the natural medium, you're not something that is taking hold of nature, you're just a part of it. So, and for example, Kanak people, they have this thing like when a baby is born, he receives a name, and the name of the baby is the name of a place, of an actual place that belongs to the tribe. And so the baby is this place, and their name is the same. So he's sprouting out of this area. So this is a very like tribal concept, and to tribal people, these are not just mere words, they're like integrated, it's something that they live with. So growing up side to side with these people, and in New Caledonia, which is such a preserved place, I guess I grew up really close to nature, and I learned how to develop love for it, and in love in the sense that if I see nature out of balance, it's kind of hurtful to me, or very hurtful, I should say. And so, also like when you grow up on an island, it's like you're growing up in this bubble. You think the whole world is the same, right? Because this is all you know. And as soon as I started traveling outside, I noticed that the bubble actually burst and that the whole world wasn't as preserved as my homeland was. And this was really, I guess, the thing that really sparked my rebellion, and the fact that I wanted to tell people about it. And I think it's really important that the people of the Pacific Islands, especially nowadays in the 21st century, I think it's really important that these people from the Pacific Islands, they get a voice that can be heard by the global community, because
Yes.
it's something that, so since we are very
Yes.
few people on these islands, it's like we don't exist, no, like the world community does not really hear our voice, and we don't really have a sit at the table where people speak like, oh, this is what we're gonna do with earth. And I think that nowadays it is really important that the voices of Pacific Islanders get heard, sorry, because we're part of these nations that are like seeing the change happen. Like I always give this example, but here in Europe, a lot of people, there are some people who think like global warming is a hoax. They think it's like political
Mhm.
propaganda.
Right. Climate
And
change. Oh, yeah, that happened thousands and thousands of years ago as well.
yeah, so but for me, it's like growing up in New Caledonia, like the beach in front of my house, like I used to go there when I was a kid, and there is some corals in front, like they're just like literally like 50 meters away from the shore, and they were 50 meters away from the shore when I was a kid, and now they've been pushed 200 meters back, and all the coral in front is dead. So, like, this is just a simple example to illustrate the fact that we Pacific Islanders, we notice these changes that bigger nations like continents are responsible for because of the rhythm of the life that they're having right now. Well, the situation is changing in the Pacific Islands. We've seen islands disappear, we've seen beaches disappear, we've seen coral dying, and all these things. So we have like a direct account on what is happening. And I think in that sense, I think it's important that the rest of the world would hear the Pacific voices, you know?
This is such a good point, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the Food Matters podcast, because there's not many people that are able to raise the voices. It's like I grew up. I have a Vanuatu passport, so I call myself indigenous to Vanuatu as well. And there's not many people like us, Marcus, that are able to really put the people of the tribal and indigenous on a pedestal and be able to allow their voices to go further.
Mm-hmm.
But because the nature of the way the people are, they're very humble people. They're not going to be as educated. They're not as striving for success. They're not as
Exactly.
individualistic minded as, I guess, the West. So you wouldn't really see them go out and stand and preach on a platform. So it is really up to people like us to be able to raise them up and to lift up the voices of the indigenous and let that speak through our music or our podcasts or our greater work, where people can become more aware. And I guess documentary films or even music videos. I love your music video where you showcase how the people, the Kanaki people, actually live close to the land, and they grow their own food and they harvest their food and they make the foods, and everything is a community based experience. Can you tell us a little bit more about how community works? See, what I find here in the local village is that no one really is about individualism and
Mm-hmm.
success, and no one really encourages success of the individual. But once your community has success, everybody has a win, everybody has a party. So there's
Mm-hmm.
this whole movement towards establishing a strong sense of bond in your community rather than each for their own, get out of my way, competition, I want more money than you. Any of that doesn't really exist. Do you
Mm-hmm.
find that as well in the Kanaki people?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you said, and it brought up to mind this one thing that an elder told me one time is that like Western society is built like community is built around the individual. So you have the individual in the middle, and the community is around it. So what they say is that like the individual has to be happy in order for the community to be happy. So the community is never happy because not every individual can be happy at the same time. It's not going to happen. But in a tribal setting, like in a real tribal community setting, it's like the opposite conception. So it's like community is in the center of things. So in order for the individual to be happy, the community needs to be happy. It's the opposite. So it's like this is really embedded in the people. So it's like everybody knows inside the tribe that if they want to be happy as an individual, the whole community needs to be happy. So this changes everything in the relationship that people have with their surroundings, I guess, because everything you're going to work towards is that the community would be happy. So you're going to serve the community, and after you've served the community, then you can rest and you can feel good. So yeah, I think it's like it's completely different. And for me, it's really been a mind opener to spend time with these people, because where I was brought up, it's not the same conception. Like I was brought up in the city, and even though the city is like so close to the tribes, well, it's not the same mindset, right? So for me, it was like spending time with them. I had to deconstruct all of these things, and really like observe and see how these people were doing it, because once again, for us right now, these are just words. But when you hang out with tribal people, you can see it's not just words. It's really like part of their being, and is the way they relate to the world. So it makes a big difference, doesn't it?
It does. And I remember reading one of my favorite books on the blue zones and the longest lived people that live. They're centurions. They lived over 100. And they looked at all of the blue zones around the world. And there's probably about 8 of them that they interviewed, the people and the way of life. And they looked at the way that they communicate with each other. And one of the biggest things that they found is that these people, they're centurions, they had a very rich sense of community. So their happiness was built around the fact that they always had a neighbor to go and story with, or a friend down the road that they can hang out with and form a group and create music or drink wine or have a story together and eat food together. There's always this sense of community that allows people to feel valued, to feel that they're part of a bigger picture, that they have purpose,
Mhm.
right? They see the young ones grow up. The elders are respected because that they are able to be a voice for the young ones. And see that that balance in the West is somehow lost. You know, we have stuck all of
Mhm.
our elders in old people's homes, and the young ones, we hardly ever see them being born anymore, you know. So there's a loss of connection with our community, our families, our tribes people.
Mhm.
So is that something as well that you noticed where people come together and they actually feel more happy in a community and they have sense of purpose?
Yeah, I think like in tribal communities, you don't. It's not like in the Western world nowadays. You choose, so you don't choose. You don't get to choose your family, but you get to choose who you hang out with and who you want to be with. And when you don't like these people anymore, you can just find some other friends. But I guess in a tribal setting, it doesn't work like this because the tribe is going to remain the tribe. It's not going to change. And so you have to accept people for who they are, for what they are, and you're not going to change them. You're just going to have to grow with them and support them. So I guess once again, it's a really different setup. And in a way, it's really nice because you don't lose anything. Like for example, you were just speaking about old people's homes, and I think this is such a good example of how far our society has gone out of boundaries, to the extent that like old people who are libraries, like living libraries full of experience and information, are left to finish their lives in some like elderly people's homes, and you just pay money for your parents to be in there, and so you don't take care of them. I think maybe like the only way that would make old people's home acceptable would be that we would put the kindergarten in the same place, so that the elderly people could watch out after the young kids, and there could be this transmission of information that needs to happen in order for society to be healthy. And I think if we keep on going on that path, we're going to lose a lot of information.
Mm, beautifully answered. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about the movement of Rastafari and what it means to you, and how come, for example, you have long dreadlocks? A lot of people may not necessarily have them, but what is the spiritual sense behind the Rastafari movement?
Well, for me, it all started by listening to Bob Marley, of course. And, I was like being a kid growing up in this modern world, like in the Rasta movement, I found a lot of answers, and I found a lot of things that resonated with my being. The fact that music was something that we used to get closer to higher consciousness, being a vegetarian, like living peacefully and refusing violence. All these things that compose the Rasta spirituality really touched me. The thing that touched me the most was how Rasta managed to link revolution, like rebellion, against the system with spirituality. And I think it was one of the only movements that really brought the two together. So, of course, as a teenager, I was really touched by it. And as I was saying, like from when I was a young kid, I had these lots of questions like running around my head, and I had this feeling, that there was something more to it. And when I heard about Rastafari for the first time, the thing that obsessed me the most was Ethiopia, because Rastas, they speak a lot about Ethiopia. And I was taught as a kid in school that Ethiopia was the poorest country in the world, and so on. And so in a sense,
Mm.
for me, Ethiopia was like the furthest place I could possibly go in my lifetime. It seemed so far, like physically, but also like mentally. Like it looked like it was really far out. So of course, when I was 18 and I started traveling, the first place I went to was Ethiopia. And I when I traveled to Ethiopia for the first time, I wasn't really into Rasta. Like I listened to Bob Marley, I knew about the movement, but I was more interested about Ethiopia like as this distant place where I was gonna find something mystical. Like it didn't really have any reason whatsoever to why I was going there other than spiritual purposes and knowing I was gonna find something there. So this first journey to Ethiopia was really interesting for me, and it was there in Shashamane. Shashamane is a place in southern Ethiopia that was given by Emperor Haile Selassie to all the people of the Black diaspora. So all the people that have been deported during the 400 years of slavery to the Caribbean, to South America, to Europe. Haile Selassie gave them this land so that they could come back to Africa. So now, if you go to Shashamane, you'll find a lot of Rasta people from Jamaica, of course, a lot of them from Jamaica, and a lot of them from the French Caribbean, some of them from America, from the UK. And so for me, this was my first real contact with Rastafari. And it was really interesting because I was welcomed by this family, and they literally, for me, it was like the Rasta school, like we sat down, and this old Rasta elder, he taught me all about the movement, and we read some, like newspaper clippings from the time of Haile Selassie, and he introduced me to the whole movement. And there was a lot of like mystical parts to it because my name is Marcus. My mother called me Marcus, which is the name of Marcus Garvey, who is the biggest prophet of the Rasta movement. And there was like all these little things that made me be very attentive to what I was being told. And so I guess after going to Ethiopia for the first time, that's when I decided like, I'm a Rasta. Like I'm gonna follow this walk of life, and I'm gonna implement these spiritual precepts in my daily routine. And I guess it all made a lot of sense because to me, like, there was so many questions and Rasta was the answer. So after moving from Ethiopia, then I had this, I think it's like Rasta to me was like spiritual discipline, because in order to like cruise through this existence and be safe and evolve spiritually, I knew I needed to have a discipline, and Rasta was the discipline that found me.
That's so beautiful, beautiful. Wow, thank you for explaining that journey. Personally, I've been to Ethiopia as well. I remember seeing the gunshots in the house of Haile Selassie, and traveling down further to Asmara and hearing the stories. And it's so powerful, when you really go and visit and see the people, the origins of where it all started, and to listen to the stories
Mhm.
of how proud they are about their story. And for those that are listening, I feel like a lot of us, we want to find our tribe. We do. We want to find our connection with the people that we resonate with, that we have the same entrainment, the same wavelength with. And I'm not saying that I'm going to go and grow rustas, and do that myself, but there's a certain type of element of that I connect with, with the purity and the way that, you eat, and the way that you see yourself as sacred, you see your community as sacred, and you have some type of meditative practices that you do to hold space for yourself and your community. But for those that are listening and they want to also be part of this tribal movement, what else, what other things, or what sort of things can they do to feel that they are also part of the Rastafari tribe, or this type of community?
Well, I think if somebody has a spiritual calling in their heart, like the one I was speaking of before, like having this appetite for truth, I think they should just follow it with an open heart and full on sincerity, and they will eventually find their caste or their creed. And because for me it was like I found Rasta found me, and I felt very at home in that philosophy, in that walk of life. But there is this part of me that believes that I cannot be defined by anything. Like this is not my hair, this is not my body, like this, my name is not even my name, and I'm something that's way deeper than this, right? And I cannot be defined by concepts or words or entities or how would you say? Um, uh, but so for me, it's like it's all about being true to oneself and trying to listen to the inner voice, because it might sound cliche, but I believe we have the truth inside, like all of us, and we've just been polluted by this modern society, by all these things we've been eating. We've been speaking about that before, by whatever chemicals are in the water we've been drinking, by the things we're listening to, by the things we're watching. So we're really polluted, right? But if we manage to like cleanse ourselves, purify from some of the pollution, then we can listen to the inner voice, and the inner voice knows everything. Like there's no need to be a part of anything, and I think it's beautiful, and I think it's liberating to when you finally find out that you don't need to belong to any movement, that you are, and that's all that's you're ever gonna be, so for me, like my advice to most people is this, like I think we need to free ourselves from anything that locks us down and prevents us from being who we really are inside. So I think it's okay to use some paths for a while, paths that are already beaten, but then everybody has to find their own truth and their own meaning, and nobody can find it for you. Like we all have to find it for ourselves, and I truly believe that.
Ah, it's so nice. One more question about your travels recently. I noticed through social media that you were traveling through India. I
Mhm.
know that you said you traveled expansively throughout your life, but what is it in India that touches your heart when you go there?
Oh, India. We could do a podcast about India. It's wow, I would have so much to say, but I guess India is like, I think everybody should go to India once in their life at least, like because it's for me India was like ingesting a mad drug. I don't know how to say. It's like India is so different from everything that I know, like everything that I see, everything that I smell, everything that I taste, everything that I touch is different. Like, and my first time in India, it was like, you know there is this part of you that doesn't understand anything that's going on, because you can't understand, because the culture is so different, and at the
Because
same
it's a culture
time
shock. Yeah.
and at the same time there is something very mystic, and what I really like about India and about being in India is that Indian society allows room for the spiritual being. And this is really important, because in the West, There is no room for the spiritual being, not yet. It's not as accepted. In India, you can sit in the middle of the street and like meditate, and nobody really cares about it. It's not anything special. And you can openly speak about spirituality, about the most crazy things that you feel, and this is just part of daily life. And India, they have this, I mean, our culture in the West is said to be like about 2000 years old, like even our calendar is only 2000 years old. When you go to India, like they can trace their written history back like 5000, 6000 years. So this makes up a whole different society. And to make the link, since we're talking about India, like to make the link with Rastafari, it's really important because a lot of people don't know about it. But a lot of the mystic that was infused into the Rastafari movement comes directly from India. And because like, I'm sure you know about this story, but the one they called the first Rasta was Leonard Howell, and he founded a big community in Jamaica in the 40s. They called him the Gong, and he made this community that was called the Pineapple, that was a completely self-sufficient, vegetarian, organic, self-sufficient community up in the hills. And Leonard Howell, he was really the man that founded the mystic behind Rastafari. And the thing is that Leonard Howell was in contact with a lot of Indian workers that had been sent to Jamaica at the time. And these Indian workers, they gave
Wow.
a lot of things to Leonard Howell. And so when Leonard Howell told them about his whole doctrine and about the fact that he believed that Haile Selassie was the second advent of Christ, the Indians, they didn't have any problem believing him, because Indians, they have millions of gods, right? So in India, you can create a god. It's not a problem. It's
And
something that you
gurus
can
and
do.
prophets.
So
Yes.
so for them, when Leonard Howell came up with Haile Selassie, Rastafari, they said, "Oh, great, this is perfect," and they gave him a lot of mystic things, which is the connection to yoga, the dreadlocks. This in India is called jata, and it's got a written history, of course, that dates back like thousands of years. The fact that the Rastas are vegetarian. These are all, and of course, the most important of all, the Indian hemp that Rastas use as a sacrament. All these things, they actually came from India, and they were like, so Rastafari, in a sense that a lot of people don't yet acknowledge, is the meeting of Africa and of India into one mystic. But this is a really important thing to know.
That's very interesting. And so, is part of the, I guess, also in the Rastafari movement, but as part of your daily routine and the way that you access the day normally, do you have spiritual practices that you adhere to, some type of meditation? Do you have, because you don't often see famous singers and musicians that travel the world able to have this type of practice, because being on the road and touring means it takes a lot out of you. So I'd be interested to find out what sort of spiritual practice that you like to work on for yourself, if it's through food or through meditation, or any type of
Mhm.
practice in your music. I'd love to hear that.
Well, my practice, I would say, is like the ocean, like it's very changing. It's like, as you said, like we're musicians, we're on the road, so there will be times of my life when I have the time for it, where I'm gonna wake up every day at the same time and have this morning routine. Because of course this is really fulfilling and nourishing. So every time I can have that, I will do it. And most of the time, it will be when I go home and I don't have shows for a while. Then I really like to wake up, like wake up in the morning and be in my garden. For me, this is the most spiritual of all spiritual practices, is to tend after plants. It's something I really love to do. But when I'm touring, I guess mostly like when you're touring, you need a lot of discipline, because people, they view it as, oh, you play a show and then you party and then you do it again on the next day. But these are legends. Like, if you party 3 nights in a row, then on the fourth show you're gonna ask sorry. so so I guess when you're touring, yeah, you need to have this discipline. So you need to eat well, you need to drink well, and of course, like, meditation is a really important tool. So me, I like to practice like silence, sitting and breathing meditation. And I wouldn't say that I do it all the time every day, but I try to practice it as much as I can every time that I feel that I need it, because I feel like it's a good way to, like, recenter and load up on light and just get ready to go back into the outside world. So I think most of my practice is like this, like the discipline around what I eat, how I sleep, and breathing exercises. And I have a tendency to, to mix everything. So yeah, I don't have like a specific practice, and I
Breathing,
like to
breathing
let
while
my
you're eating,
practice
I mean.
evolve. Yeah. Yeah, and I like to let the practice evolve with me and with time, and to be in touch with the environment that I'm in. And one thing I feel is very helpful, especially when you're an artist and you're touring, is the practice of mindfulness, because mindfulness is this meditation that you can be doing all the time, no? So, like, washing the dishes is the best practice for mindfulness, maybe, or cleaning your room or anything. But what is interesting about mindfulness is that whatever you're going to be doing, you can be doing it. You don't have to stop what you're doing in order to be mindful. So this is something that I try to practice all the time. And sometimes I even have this, I set this little bell on my phone that's gonna ring like every half an hour or something, to like remind me to be here now. Which is a good one, I feel.
That's beautiful. So you were telling me a little bit about your gardening, and I do believe that is a beautiful form of meditative practice. You're in the moment. And I'd imagine that when I picture you in your garden, it would be very different from the garden that you probably used to tend to in New Caledonia. But so tell us a little bit about your life. You live in France now? And what type of foods do you grow in the garden?
Well, I'm here only half of the year, and I'm here at the best time, which is the around summer. And as soon as it's winter, I tend to have the want to go home really quickly. But so yeah, I found it was really interesting actually to garden in Europe, because it's a really different. So in the tropical islands, we have two seasons, right? We have like the wet, and the less wet season. But it's like it's summer all year round. Like, for example, in New Caledonia, you can grow tomatoes, all year round. So I guess it's the same in Vanuatu. Like, you can plant tomatoes and harvest them just on and on and on, right? And in France, it's very different, because you only have the summer. But this, I feel like here the summer is really explosive. Like, I was really impressed by the gardens that I've been into here in France, because things grow really big in a really short amount of time, because the days are way longer. Like, you have 18 hours of sunlight, it's really warm. And the soil on the old continent is also kind of like good soil. So yeah, I felt it was interesting. And for me also, what I learned from gardening here is like, there's a really different mindset in Europe, because as I was just saying, you have winter in Europe. So in the winter, you can't be growing things. So this makes a really different mindset, because when you're growing in the summer in Europe, you need to watch out, because you need to preserve a lot of things. So you need to make preserves. You need to, and watch out for the winter that's coming. So in a sense, there's this really big sense of sustainability, because you have to watch out for the winter coming. So you have to be conscious, you have to be cautious about what you're going to do with the food, how much you're going to plant, when you're going to harvest it, how you're going to keep it. And I thought that was interesting, because in the tropics we don't really have this. We really have this day-to-day living. And there's always going to be a papaya that's going to ripen by itself that you can eat. There's always going to be coconuts every day. And in Europe and in colder climates, the reality is very different. So for me, it was interesting to learn about that.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that, because I noticed here as well in Vanuatu, people are not really focused on the future, and the reason would be is because they've always been focused on the present, because they've always had access to food. They've had access to, literally, like you said, the pawpaw. You can just grab something out of the tree. Bananas. There's always a coconut. There's always some root vegetables growing, and the harvesting season is all year round. So I guess in Europe we've had this idea of like, oh no, we're going to starve if we don't think about the future, and
Hmm.
we're not going to thrive if we don't put these foods in some type of conserving or some sort of jars or some sort of canning to be able to last through the winter. So it's like we have a whole different mindset about thinking about the future. And I remember when they first introduced savings accounts here in Vanuatu, and the people were like, "Why would we want to save our money? Like, we don't. What do we save it for? We normally don't." Like, they couldn't understand the concept of starting up a savings account. It's like these banks are like, "Yay,
Yeah,
everybody,
of
you can
course.
start your own savings account." They're like, no one was lining up. No one was lining up because, even the other day I had lots of maniocs. They were finished. The maniocs were all done. Like, all the maniocs were ready. And I said, okay, can you guys harvest? I said, ask my gardener, can you guys harvest all of them? And my mindset was thinking, because that's what you do when something's ready, you harvest all of them. They're like, hmm, sister, you put them where? And I'm like, well, we're going to harvest them, otherwise they're going to rot in the ground. They're like, no, no, no. The garden is your refrigerator, that you store it in your garden until you're ready to eat
Uh-huh.
it. And it's like a whole different idea. It's, uh,
Yeah,
it's like when we live in the present, only think about the present. But when we have to think about the future and the winter, then we train different parts of our brain to be aware of thinking about the future.
very true. And I think also these things are responsible for the shaping of societies. And this is why, like, we wonder sometimes, like, why the north is so different from the south, like, historically speaking. But this is the direct reason, is that people living in Europe for generations, they've had to, like, figure out how they were going to get through the winter. So this is like, they've had to construct houses that were properly isolated so that the heat wouldn't dissipate. And, like, for example, this simple thing of building an isolated house, it's not relevant in a tropical setting. So of course the people in the tropics, they never studied how they would build such a house. So this, I think, this can really explain why there's been, like, so many different humans in different places, because of the climate.
Okay, well, beautiful, Marcus. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I have one more question before we go, and I think the viewers would also like to know, what type of food is your favorite type of food? What do you resonate most with?
Oh, my favorite type of food. So the thing is, I'm a foodie. Like, I love eating. I love eating, and I guess,
Right?
like, being a vegetarian for me. Like, when I became a vegetarian, it was like, this is when I learned how to eat. Because before, of course, I was brought up being non-vegetarian. And for me, when I was a kid, it was like, oh, like a steak and some rice, and I'm fed. And when I became a vegetarian, I learned about, like, how do I eat. So there is a lot of things that I really like. And I couldn't speak a particular kind of food, but I think I really like Indian and Indonesian food a lot. I really like it a lot, and I don't have
I
any,
thought,
yeah, like, specific food. But I think, yeah, the on my travels, the place that really touched me the most with the food was Indonesia. I really loved the way they cook there, and the love they put in the food, and how they have so many kinds of vegetables and so many vegetarian options. So yeah, I really enjoyed my time in Indonesia, and I found that the flavors they had on the islands there were different from anything I had tasted before. It was really interesting.
No, I love it too. I love it. So, yes, thank you for sharing your heart with us. And for those viewers that are wanting to learn more about how they can get access to your work, please share
Mhm.
how we can get access to your latest album, or tell us when it came out and how we can get a hold of it.
So yeah, this album came out in the beginning of this year. It's called Ready for Battle, and it's got 16 tracks, and you can find it on all platforms. Actually, you can follow me on social media, any social media. You can find all the songs. If you don't have any paying streaming platform, you can listen to all the songs for free on YouTube, and you can also watch the videos. They're all on YouTube. And otherwise, you can find my music on any streaming platform like Spotify and every social media.
Nice, nice, nice. Well, I've bought myself a CD. Those are like the old fashioned things, like CDs, right? People don't have that anymore, do they?
No, but actually,
But
like,
yes,
in Europe, the thing that is happening is that the vinyls are coming back. Like,
vinyls.
they're really, yeah, like, actually, now the vinyl business is exploding, and we don't sell CDs anymore, but we sell vinyls. Like, every show we play, we sell so much vinyls. People, so I think it's a positive thing. There's going back to the. I think people love the experience of putting down the vinyl, and spinning it and listening to the. I think is got something special.
That's amazing. It's great that it's coming back. Well, thank you again, Marcus. Thank you for your time. And yes, keep up
Thank you
the
for having
amazing
me
work
over.
touring the world. Not everybody can do this. So thank you for doing it on the behalf of the planet and the indigenous and the people of the Rastafari movement.
At your service.
So, yes, thank you everyone for listening. I really enjoyed that talk. I hope you did too. And there will be more of these on the Food Matters podcast. So, head to foodmatters.com and see you again.